You all please say hello. Introduce already. Are you new? I've not seen you before. Yes. About the prophet's reward and the righteous. All right. So today we will. Okay, I talk to you all, right? Okay, you all can see, right? Okay. Harold. So we are en route to talk about contemplation, which I think it's coming to the point. It's almost midpoint of our book already. And I think we had a flavor of what contemplation is, but today we're just going to go right into it and to see what it's really about. As you can see, the theme, and you hear the things over and over again, and they're very similar. I think Ilidilio purposely uses repetition so that we really get it, or either that she's got not very much to say. Huh? Even in the chapter, I'm like, isn't it the same thing? Yeah, but said in many different ways to skin a cow or horse. So let's start with a song. No prizes for guessing what song. There's only one that song. Okay, so let's listen to this song. And this was, if you all don't know, was sung in the mood of her mother, Ortolana. So this is as if the mother, who knows Clare very well, the eldest daughter, and seen how she transmitted her own faith to Clare, and then see her own daughter blossoming into this soul that is just dedicated to God, and how this soul has decided to give up everything and break with every kind of tradition, because they were nobles. And even like, I don't want to become a Benedictine, I don't want to become like this poor group. I just want to follow Francis, because the way Francis loves God and is the way I want to love God as well. And seeing the daughter leave home, and then Ortolana herself also left home. So there are 4 women from the same family that joined. So Clare, the sister Agnes, then the mother, and then another cousin, Beatrice. And all 4 noble women now. So let's take this song as our, hopefully that speaks to our heart, and for us to, if we find that spark within us to want to give up everything to follow God, then let this be the song to inflame that spark.
There was once a girl from a noble family, born into wealth. There was nothing in need, but she knew there was something more to this life. So she gave up her riches to follow the Christ. Saint Clare, how did you find strength and courage to walk away from everything that was there? Saint Clare, teach me how to prepare to receive the Lord and to live by the will of God. When she heard the words of a young Saint Francis in a church proclaiming a new way to live, she was only just 18 when she cut off her hair as a sign of her promise to live a life of prayer. Saint Clare, how did you find strength and courage to walk away from everything that was there? Saint Clare, teach me how to prepare to receive the Lord and to live by the will of God. Many followed her to seek the Lord. She founded an order to live by his law. When the soldiers came to attack the poor Clares, she held up the blessed sacrament and they fled. Saint Clare, how did you find strength and courage to walk away from everything that was there? Saint Clare, teach me how to prepare to receive the Lord and to live by the will of God. To receive the Lord and rejoice in the Lord, to proclaim his love and to live by the will of God.
And for our prayer, we take this prayer by St. Bonaventure. And just imagine Bonaventure saying this to you and beckoning you. That Christ on the cross bows his head, waiting for you, that he may kiss you, his arms outstretched, that he may embrace you, his hands are open, that he may enrich you, his body spread out, that he may give himself totally, his feet are nailed, that he may stay there, his side is open for you, that he may let you enter there. Amen. And also to see this very emotive, affective Christ who is crucified and yet still desiring us from the cross. And just to imagine him doing this for us while we are still sinners. That we sometimes resist him, sometimes we refuse to listen or rebel, or sometimes we feel absolutely helpless and hopeless in our weaknesses and our imperfections. And yet Christ wants to do this for us, to us, and with us. Anyway, background story to story of St. Clare. The original singer was supposed to be Lea Salonga. You don't know who Lea Salonga is. Then when Lea Salonga said, I'm too busy, I got a new album. Then we asked Corinne May. That piece that you heard was just a demo tape. Yeah. And then Corinne, I think she also declined. So the demo tape became the thing law. Yeah. So, have you fallen in love before? Even if never fallen in love, have you been infatuated? Preferably person, and not like a place or an imaginary thing or game, or infatuated with a sport or anything. Let's talk about a human person. That this falling in love experience feels very out of control. That the mind is just wrapped up with this person and then just absolutely obsessed. I want to help it, but cannot help it. And Iladelio says that we fall because of gravity. Something is pulling, right? And it's pulled by something greater than ourselves, that we cannot help fall. I think that, is it Elvis Presley? I can't help falling in love, yes. Can't help but fall, right? And then sometimes when we fall, we lose our balance. And when we lose our balance, we sometimes leave behind our pride, because malu fall down. But I think we leave behind our security. I think our groundedness and our centeredness when we fall. I think sometimes we're just so pulled, like. And so she concludes and says that something greater than ourselves pulls us beyond ourselves to another, that we gravitate to another. And that gravity is the gravity of love that we talk about in reference to St. Clare, right? And so we talk about contemplation. It's not an end in itself. What is contemplation ultimately leading into is personal transformation. But transformation of your person as you are right now, but transform into whom? Whose form are you going to be transformed into? It is not like some, be transform into like Smurfette or something, right? It's like quite scary if you're going to transform into like Teletubbies. Is it your era, Teletubbies? I think so, yes. You'd be like, oh, I'm Lala, kind of a thing. That would be quite a disaster. Oh no, right now I think in your head it's like Teletubbies. Right. So what are we transformed into? Because trans means change. Form is your shape. Yeah. So we change our form into something else. So what are we transformed? And here it says we are conformed as we are transformed. As we change our form, we take on the form of another. So we become same form, conform, right? And that is in God. Not in anything else or anyone else, but God. God who created us and is calling us back to God's self. And that's what this transformation is all about. And you'll find that the language here gets transformed. Francis was always about sequela Christi, following in the footsteps, the vestigia of Jesus Christ. Then Clare always talks about imitation, but for Bonaventure, it changes into the word conformation, because Bonaventure was so caught up with the stigmatized Francis of that form that Francis was so conformed because of the 5 wounds. Okay, so there's actually a change of terminology as we go along. Clare, in the 3rd letter to Agnes, Agnes was a Bohemian princess, not Rhapsody, of Prague, and she didn't want, like Clare, this life of nobility and riches and power and all that thing. She just wanted to follow God and just to have herself preserved for God and God alone. And so when the friars came to Prague, she was like, hey, it's possible for me to have this life. That's why Clare and Agnes corresponded. Thank goodness, this Bohemian princess actually keeps all her letters. Not like Clare. We don't have any of Agnes's letter to Clare. Maybe out of poverty, they are, "Aiya, 我不要," kind of a thing, right? But Agnes still keeps all the letters. That's why we have Clare's letter to Agnes. Thank goodness, 4 letters. In the 3rd letter, and Clare develops actually her spirituality through the letters. Okay? And Clare writes, place your mind before the mirror of eternity. Place your soul in the brilliance of glory. Place your heart in the figure of divine substance and transform your entire being into the image of the Godhead itself through contemplation. And these last 2 lines, if you've been to San Damiano Franciscan Center, you'll find that these last 2 lines are at the wall welcoming you. And it says, hermitage of what Solitudine of Naples, but actually whatever it is actually from Clare herself. Okay, yeah. We just want to make the thing glam, like some hermitage of Solitudine. So look at this line a little bit more. So Ilya is helping us to see what is the word contemplation, because Ignatian also has got Ignatian contemplation. Teresian also has got Teresian contemplation. So what is contemplation? Lectio Divina, the 4 steps, also has contemplation as the 4th step, right? Lectio, meditatio, oratio, contemplatio. So our contemplatio is quite somewhat similar more to the 4th step also of the Lectio, but not quite. The Ignatian contemplation is using the mind and having imagination. Technically, according to Teresa, it is the 2nd step, which is meditatio. For Teresa, meditation is always discursive. There's a discourse. Something's happening in the head. Contemplation, for Teresa and also Lectio Divina, is when we sit and then we are just silent with God and we're just taken up by God. That's contemplation. That we don't do anything, unlike meditation. Contemplation, God does everything. But Franciscan contemplation has got also a different element, okay, which you're going to see what that is. Contemplation actually means one in mind with, literally. And contemplation is of the mind, soul, and heart, and it's a deepening of love through transformation into the beloved. So you keep hearing the word love. You keep hearing the word transformation. And therefore it's relational. There is another. And this relational thing is very, very Franciscan. Right? Because we're made for relationships. Why? Who is the model source of all relationships? The Trinity. So it didn't come from nowhere. Yeah, and we're made in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, we are also relational. And it's not a matter of self-reflection, because this is meditation. It's not like, I wonder what this means. I wonder what that means. Okay, it's not just that, right? That's meditation. Nor flight from the world. This is very Benedictine. The fuga mundi. It's like, oh, the world is very scary. Let me just go and run away. That's more the Benedictine. That's why they're always up in mountains. Francis was always among the people, right? So there's a different spirituality there. Not privilege of cloistered monk or nun. Some people think, yeah, I lay person, I'm out in the world. I go MRT, I really cannot trigger. In the traffic, I cannot trigger. I get triggered all the time. My boss is like that, my colleague is like that. Then I was like, oh my gosh. So all the time we are triggered. And we think like, cloistered monks and nuns, the life's so peaceful because everybody's so nice to each other. Not triggered at all. So can do contemplation law. Labis, right? So we are humans, and there's always fallen human nature everywhere, and we get triggered either by them or by our own wounds, right? So, and I think we're going to talk a lot about that later, about self-knowledge and talk about woundings. So everyone is invited and challenged and called to contemplation. And it's not some genetic predisposition or an esoteric experience, thinking that, oh, I test your DNA, no, this one got a gene for contemplation. You got no gene, okay, you can give up, don't try so hard, right? An esoteric experience, sometimes people want like, I must see visions or I must hear something, then I'm like having contemplation. Labis. Okay. Contemplation, as you see, what is it and what is not, right? So it's telling you what is not. So we get that out of the way. So what is contemplation? Contemplation means the ability to gaze on weak humanity and see there the presence of God and to unite with what one sees. This is summary statement. What happens after this is explanation of this. So keep going back to this as definition. For all the very good students want to learn definition exam just learn this one then can already. Okay. Stare at this for a bit and then see what it speaks to you. Not very easy, right? Remember you see the word gaze, which is the first step of Clare. To gaze, to consider, contemplate, and then imitate, right? And then to see that the presence of God, they can consider the presence of God, and then it will lead you to unite with one what sees. So there's a conformity and transformation. So you start with Christianity, because we're Christians, and Christianity is a sacramental religion, that we have bread and wine, but there's something beyond. There's oils, water, but there's something beyond. Okay? But what is this beyond? And it says an outward sign of invisible grace. We're so used to this definition, right? But what really is beyond is God is there desiring to connect with us. Sacraments is basically God's way of telling you, you are not alone in all the milestones of your life. At birth, when you're maturing to become an adolescent, when you're getting married, when you become a priest, when you're fallen down, falling sick, either physically or spiritually, I am there with, or you're going to die. I'm there with you every single step of the way. But how do I express my love? Because you can't see me. So I give you signs. And of course, the greatest sign is Jesus Christ. So we say that Jesus is also the sacrament of the Father. But we've got this talking about the 7 sacraments now, right? That God revealed, yet concealed in humble signs of our creation. Just look at the simple bread. No taste, no color. And it's just simple. And yet that's God. Can you imagine? The Lord of the universe, creator of our world, is present in this bread. If there's not humility, I don't know what is. And that's our God. And if we want to be like God, then how should we be as well? But very often, we like to rationalize God and then see God in the brackets of our minds. Our finite minds trying to grasp this infinite God. Just like our fleshy eyes trying to look at the sun. What happens when you look at the sun? And as when you look at the sun for 10 minutes, I guarantee you, you'll not see anything in your life anymore. But that's what some mystics say the dark night of the soul. When God, if you imagine him as pure brilliance, coming into the finite soul, our finite mind, then when we encounter immediately, that means immediate is not fast, instantaneous. You know what's mediator, right? I think your lawyers out there know mediation. So mediator means someone is there to mediate, go in between. Immediate means no mediator, right? Just like possible, impossible. So mediate and immediate. So there's no in between. No bread and wine, no oil, no water. Now you encounter God as God in the godlessness of God, right? As God is. What will happen to our soul? That's why sometimes it appears dark, because it's too bright, right? So really, our minds are so finite and so limited. And that's why we need contemplation to be able to see God with these eyes that can grasp God. Not with our fleshy eye or with our rational eye of the mind, but now with the soul's eye, the spiritual eye. So you keep hearing the word spiritual eye, right? And I think some of you have keep hearing me talking about Bonaventure's triple eye, the oculis triplex, where we got the carnis, carnal eye, rationis, the rational eye, and then finally the oculis contemplationis, the contemplative eye, to see as God sees, right? So Clare's contemplation is of the heart. And this heart can be able to see God in ordinary reality. We see bread at the altar, but it's not just bread. We taste the bread, but it's not just bread. That's because our eyes are open. But sometimes you only open here. but our hearts truly, truly open. And that's the purpose of this chapter. So Clare is the pianticella, or the little plant of Francis. So everything Francis does, she also wants to copy, right? So we have to go back to Francis's kind of contemplation. So here, Francis elaborates a little bit more about bread and wine. So it describes the hidden presence of God in the humanity of Christ. In the mind of God, in the heart of God. Why must Jesus come to us? Yes, there's that sin, but it's coming us to show the way back to God, to God's heart. Because we keep thinking that we can't access God's heart anymore. And there's a lot of fear. And I think I've mentioned this several times. The Jews, from 10 commandments, at the time of Jesus, how many commandments were there? How many laws? Yes, there are 613 laws. And remember Jesus saying that you who wash your hands all the way up to your elbow, if the requirement is just to wash your hands, why would one have to wash all the way to the elbow? Because just in case you never wash 0.13 mm of your hand, then God's going to throw you to hell. So you better wash all the way to your elbow, just in case. Can you imagine very far? If this is not fear, I don't know what is. But some of us live our lives like this. Like the core laws, I better observe, but just in case I don't transgress, I better draw another circle outside, so I never transgress. Because I don't want to go to hell. So our whole concept is, don't go to hell. Don't go to hell. Don't go to hell. Our bandwidth is all over, not making mistakes, not making mistakes. Then where's the love? Where's the looking out for neighbor? Where's the self-soothing in my own difficulties? I keep focusing on not going to hell because there's a lot of fear, right? But God comes to show us the way. So the parables, like the prodigal son, which is so difficult to grasp. But Jesus tells that prodigal son story. Why? So we need to get to the heart of Jesus to get to the heart of God. And to say, excuse me, you have got it all wrong. So come back to the heart of God and know who I am. Because if you don't know who I am, your life is all over the place. Or you're going the wrong direction. And that's what Jesus is here. The way into the truth, which is the fullness of life. Right? So admonitions 1. And admonitions is written like spiritual commentary to the rule. Like this year, we celebrate 800 years of the rule, 2023, because the rule was written in 1223. And it was very legal and canonical. Nothing very spiritual. So Francis said, "Oh, want me to write rule? Okay, bo bian, I write rule, law." He didn't speak Hokkien, but you know, get me. So I got no choice to write the rule, but really, the rule for my brothers, I want the rule to have something spiritual, something livable. This law thing, right? It's not very... So the admonitions are actually his spiritual commentaries on the rule. And the very first thing he talks about, admonitions number 1, the 24 chapters, this is chapter 1. And he says, "And they saw only his flesh by means of their bodily sight." Saw, using bodily sight, that means the oculis carnis, right? The carnal eye. "Yet believed that he was God as they contemplated him with their spiritual eyes." Francis uses the word spiritual eyes, okay? Which is the oculis contemplationis, right? "As we see bread and wine with our bodily eyes, see and firmly believe that they are his most holy body and blood, living and true." So 2 levels. So the humanity of Christ enables us to see God, able to see God with the eyes of the Spirit. We see ordinary reality around us, but really we see God within, hidden in reality, in creation. That's why we talk about hidden presence. What is hidden will be made clear. That's what Jesus said, right? Not an intellectual exercise, because that's meditation. And you think, that's the rational eye. Not the intellectual exercise, but a depth of vision to see beyond. and a penetrating gaze into the heart of reality. I don't know whether you have heard me ask, what is the question behind the question? So sometimes when people ask questions about scripture, about spirituality, they ask a lot of symptomatic questions. Like, is this a sin? Is that not a sin? Then we have to ask, what is the question behind the question? We go deeper and ask, what are you actually afraid of? Where is your question coming from? What is this need? What is this fear? Or where is this drive, right? If you get to the bottom of it, you'll see that everything will be clear, right? So the ways of seeing the depth, but it's good now. That's why when you write your journals, I hope you all write journals, right? I'm smiling. So journals are your everyday occurrences, and sometimes you write reflection, right? But these are all your symptoms in that sense, your everyday occurrence. Like, I like this, I don't like this, I get triggered, I'm attracted, but then sometimes when you read, it's good to read back and read deeply. I sometimes recommend using highlighter and then just highlight the same words that you see. Then you see, oh, like this word orange one or that orange. Hey, how come so many times I write orange thing? Huh? Then it's yourself telling yourself what is happening to yourself. And what is the deeper thing behind it. Right? So it's sometimes good. And then you can bring it to a spiritual director and have a chat with. So this is a way of seeing the depth of something that leads to union with one God sees, right? Because the depth is God. So the deeper you go, the deeper we go into God. And it decenters by taking us out of ourselves and into the other by way of seeing it is horizontally ecstatic. And Michael Blastic is a Franciscan, and you will see the footnotes, or actually his endnotes. Eliot Dillard is quoting from an article from a Franciscan leadership conference, and he wrote something called Contemplation and Compassion. I think I've mentioned this before. Contemplation and compassion, ecstasy is out of self. Stasis is self. Ec is out of, like exit, right? So if you're vertically ecstatic, you're contemplating because you're with God. Horizontally ecstasy is when you're having compassion with the other. That's why I say, if you want to love God, you need to love neighbor. Your heart is your heart. You cannot say, I love God, but I hate my neighbor. Totally like Salah, right? And it decenters us because it takes us out of ourselves. And it takes us out of ourselves, go where? Into the other, right? By way of seeing. So the eye of the heart is opened by grace, enlightened by knowledge, and strengthened for what? For love. So coming to Clare, the path to contemplation is linked with the experience of fierce suffering, of having to die. So is suffering good or bad? Huh? And I'm asking the question, macam is a moral question, right? Is it good or bad, right? But I think this is something we have to grapple with, I think, throughout our entire lives, all the way to our death. Frances embraced death as sister. She said, welcome, sister death. And even in the Canticle of Preachers, listed like, praise be you, my Lord, through sister bodily death, right? So is it suffering? Frances saw death as a portal to union with God. We're going back to God. And had to suffer, had to die, die. Yeah, some people lucky they die in their sleep, so it's quite painless. But I think for most people, it's quite, traumatic. So what is the experience of suffering? And I think more and more we have to come to that reality and the grittiness of what is suffering and pain. And here Clare says we have to die with Jesus on the cross of tribulation. To die. It's very radical, this one. Because if Jesus is willing to die, to give up his life for the love of God, Clare also says the same thing. But we can do our mini deaths now. How? By forgiving, embracing others who are annoying and difficult. And all that. And all this dying is really a cleansing and purging of all that's not of God in order to live wholly centered on God. This is the purification. Like the medievals talk about purification, illumination, and then finally, union. Right? And she brings in this interesting image and metaphor of a cocoon. That cocoon where the caterpillar forms this cocoon and then become a butterfly, right? Metamorphosis. So she says that the old person dies. We have to die to ourselves so that a new person can emerge. And God is like this cocoon where almost we can be safe. And then we can be dead to ourselves and our attachments. And then we can break forth, transform into God. Something beautiful. And the beloved is experienced as the one whose affection excites, whose contemplation refreshes, whose kindness fulfills, and delight replenishes. Is this our experience of our beloved? And I think we have to ask ourselves, is God our beloved? Today, I don't know whether you know, this week is clergy retreat. So I'm also there. And the retreat master is Bishop Greg Homing, the Bishop of Lismore, who is a Carmelite OCD, but not really OCD. He was talking about beloved and talking about when God, the Father, tells Jesus that you are my son, the beloved. My favor rests on you. And he was just saying to us that the word beloved comes from Song of Songs. And the word beloved means, I love you and no other. Because we cannot have many beloveds, right? So imagine Jesus listening to God the Father, telling him that you are my beloved. What did it do to Jesus? I think that's one experience that we can also take. Can we hear God telling us that we are his beloved? And then therefore he is also our beloved. And that we don't love anything else or anyone else above God. Then yesterday's Mass readings, gospel would make sense. If you prefer father, mother, brother, sister to me, not worthy of me. Because then I'm no longer your beloved. Because your father, mother, brother, sister, or any other attachments have become your beloved. In fact, I was talking about this in Chinese. Audrey can remember that. In the Chinese Gloria, you alone are God, you alone are holy. In Chinese is 只有你是圣的，只有你是，因为只有你是圣的，只有你是主。Okay, 你是圣的，你是主，你是至高无上的。So you are holy, you are Lord, and you are the most high, but 至高无上, right? 至高 means the highest. 无上 means nothing else above. So you're the highest, meaning nothing else above. So if I love you, there's nothing else higher than you. And we sing that at the Gloria all the time. But we just sing long. Because melody, ma. We don't think about the words. What does it mean that you are holy, you are the Lord, and you are the most high? Every time you tell God you are the most high, you're telling God, you are my beloved. There's nothing else above you. You have my heart. Make sense? Can? So next time you sing Gloria, huh? Don't just 带过, okay? Don't just just move like that only. And contemplation, once our heart is open, then everything else will never be the same again. Never be the same again. We would feel and taste the hidden sweetness of God. It's no longer hidden because now we have encountered. It's always about encounter, like Thomas. Today we celebrate the Feast of Thomas, right? The Apostle. And all he was so stuck about was logic and proof. Unless I see him and touch the side lah, the holes lah, then I'll be convinced. Which is the issue that many of our people have now. science, positivist. I need to see, I need to touch, it needs to be repeated, then it's true. But for Thomas, it was really the encounter with the risen Christ. Then all that got dissolved. So it's always about encounter. Then once we have encountered, everything is now different. So contemplation awakes the senses because our heart is open and brings them to a new level of openness to God. Because now everything screams of God. We can see that, oh my gosh. That's why Ignatius can say, see God in all things, right? It's because after your heart is open to God, you cannot not see God in all things. Right? That's why Francis saw everything as brother and sister, because everything is created by God. We see differently, hear differently, taste new things. This is not omakase, okay? Yeah. And touch the presence of God in what others perceive as secular reality. So everybody sees that this is secular, ordinary. But for us, we see God's imprint in it. And the imprint of grace and how we are all interconnected. Yeah. Nothing is profane for those who know how to see, for the whole world is charged with the grandeur of God. All this very nice sounding, huh? What about the irritating person, the broken person, the disfigured personality in our lives? Dang, dang, dang. That's where the challenge comes in already. You can see where it's going. Now, like, haha, very nice, everything different, right? We have to embrace everything. Okay, so the one who contemplates God is the one who's centered on God. Coming to this self-centeredness, the heart is full of love, dwelling in God, and we must gaze into the mirror of the cross and see the joys and sorrows of being human. Not just the joys, but the sorrows as well. So that line, transform my entire being into the image of the Godhead itself. This dwelling in God by which we are transformed in the image of God means that we remain with God, especially in times of suffering. So that fidelity to God, we're faithful to God because God is faithful to us, leads to immense longing and ever-deepening love. That's why we keep talking about desire. Yeah, desire is a big Franciscan movement. So now, come back to Francis. Bonaventure wrote, in all the poor, so now we come to the reality of the poor, the broken, right, and the wounded. In all the poor, that most Christian poor man, Francis, saw before him a portrait of Christ. That's why there's a legend of when you hug the leper, then after that the leper disappeared, and then he understood, oh, the leper was Christ. When you do it to the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it to me, right? And that's Mother Teresa's spirituality. So the story of Greccio is actually the enactment of the nativity scene. And this is the actual place. So those of us who have gone to, if we've never brought you to Greccio before, have I? Oh, we did. The 2019. So this is the altar, this is the stone, and this was the place where Francis did that midnight mass enacting Greccio. So this is the actual place. That's where you can see Francis, the baby Jesus. So this Greccio, this is Bethlehem. Yeah? Mother Mary nursing the child. Jesus. The birth of Jesus is not an event of the past, but the incarnation is a really living reality of God's abiding presence in creation, living today. God is not abstract concept, but living reality of love, and that's the heart of the incarnation. Christ taking flesh over and over and over again, but can we see it? Right? So Christ is the love of God made visible in creation, and the contemplative heart of Francis touched the contemplative heart of God through the heart of Christ. Chim on this one. Yeah, it's very beautiful. That all the hearts are conformed and aligned. So now we come to the disfigured. The power of the contemplative vision for Francis was at the same time a desire for God, the longing, the ever-deepening love. His contemplation of creation was not merely a passive seeing, but a deep penetrating gaze into the truth of the other. And the truth of the other is not sometimes surface, but it's a deeper truth, right? And his continuous desire for God led him to realize that each creature is uniquely loved into being by God. Benedict XVI did say that every creature is willed by God and it's necessary. That every creature is uniquely loved into being. If every creature is uniquely loved into being, then you are also uniquely loved into being. The most irritating person in your life is also uniquely loved into being. Well, how is that possible? And not be right. I must be more uniquely loved into being than that horrible person. Says who, right? So the divine gift of God's goodness, divine gift, remember the Lord gave me brothers. Yeah. Because some brothers are more irritating than others. And some always ask you to do work. But think he cannot defend himself. Was made visible. How is this goodness made visible? In the disfigured flesh. If God, as God, can become a human person, then his goodness can also, because coming human, creation is like lowliness, So this is like, the leper was treated like scum of the society, because all they could do is just to spread leprosy. There's absolutely no use for them. And they were ugly to look at, contagious, wasting resources. And that's why they were all pushed out of the city walls and let them die by themselves. That's why they formed leper communities. But Francis lived among them. Angela of Foligno, that we went, I think we visited Foligno and we saw, no, this is another pilgrimage. What is the 2021 one? Angela of Foligno actually washed lepers, and then the juice on the tap. After she wash, right? She doing the water. Very thirsty. Huh? Yeah, she washed lepers, and then the like fallen skin, the bits in the water, she drank as penance. Yeah. And that's Angela of Foligno. Yeah. So if you think hugging and kissing leper was bad, Angela of Foligno took it a step further. She win already, lor. Yeah. Got leper sub one. So the divine gift of God's goodness was made visible in the disfigured flesh of the leper and the tiny things of creation. That goodness can be found in disfigured flesh. So what is disfigured in your life at the moment? Either your own or others. And Illidilu reminds us to love is to act. Say for Clare, contemplation is not the end, but a part of union. But this union, when we unite ourselves with God, the kingdom of God is not a static thing. Kingdom is a verb. It means reign. R-E-I-G-N. The kingdom of God is the reign of love. You need to act the verb, right? You don't just like, hi, I mean, the castle is so nice, like in Elsa's ice castle kind of a thing. You now have to act in love. So to see God is to love God, and to love is to act, right? So contemplation infused by love is the basis of costly discipleship. Why is it costly? Because we might see the depths of God revealed in persons and creatures, otherwise discarded, rejected, annihilated. And because of that, we must act to be with these creatures and persons that are discarded, rejected, and annihilated. That's why for us OFMs, typically in Italy, our friaries are always outside the walls. In the spirituality of Francis was outside the walls with lepers, with bandits, with people who are rejected by society. So for Clare, as for Francis and Bonaventure, this love is the path of the crucified Christ. Crucified because Christ was also disfigured on the cross and rejected and annihilated. So to be a suffering servant, willing to lay down one's life for the sake of another. So we see the ugly and despicable me too. We see the ugly as beautiful because God's love dwells precisely in weakness. That the cross of pain and shame is actually the throne of glory for our Lord Jesus Christ. That's the Gospel of John. It's the throne of glory. That's why it is consummated. Because God's will was consummated, brought to fulfillment, where? On the cross. The epitome of humiliation, pain, shame, suffering, death. End of life. Rejection, annihilation, all that on the cross, but yet that's the throne of glory for Christ. And because of that, Francis could see that, the cross, therefore, in everything that's suffering, painful, difficult, and all, Francis could see something deeper. Can we? That's the question. Beauty appears in what is otherwise despised. And how many saints, their lives have been transformed because of a bitter difficulty or suffering? So transformation and union with God does not mean retirement from ministry. So I give two tight slaps to the Friars who say, I want to go and hum and then go contemplation, and then go sit in the heart, right? Because I think some of you might remember that Francis's caves and retreat places for him was in the V of a mountain. Because as we retreat into God, into the caves of our hearts, our eye is always on the plain. It's on the V of a mountain because we have the plain, the villages still in front of us. That I retreat into God, ultimately I'm going back into the villages, into the plain, to be with the people, to bring God's love back to the people. That's the purpose of retreat. Not to run away from the world, as if the world is horrible. That's why Francis goes around and says, peace and all good. Everything is good. We only run from the world when we think that the world is bad. So you can see the vision is quite different, right? So the more we're united with God, the more we come to act like God, which is crucified Christ. And then we look at the stigmata. So this is the picture. Can you see the name? Yeah. So Francis's stigmata is not holes. It's not holy one. It's said in the legends that you can see knob, and then there's like a point out there, and then it's like gonna bend over the other side. So Francis's stigmata actually can see stuff. It's not a hole, right? And this is in Monza. For those of you Grand Prix fans, you know that Monza is the place where the Italian Grand Prix is held. But in Monza, if you ever go to Italy for Grand Prix, go and visit the Franciscan Marian sanctuary, which is a few centuries already. So I normally go there to hear confessions before Advent and before Lent. So I was just touring the friary, and then like, oh, got this statue where the stigmata of Francis is not just holes, but actually got nails. So I quickly take photo. Yeah. So at least somebody actually represented it according to the legends. Anyway, Francis was the first ever stigmatist. So after Francis received the stigmata, he did not withdraw into solitary retirement. Like, I have very painful, I'm very tired. Sorry, I go and rest. But he said, when he returned to ministry to the lepers, continued serving with a burning desire to bring God's compassionate love to those in need. So this is coming to dwell in the mystery of suffering and love. So the heart is so full, it cannot keep the love to itself. That's the thing. Right? So talking about freedom and transformation, where is this transformation? So the cross is central to Clare's spirituality, but hers is not a spirituality of sin and guilt, but one of freedom and transformation. Not to focus on the sin and the guilt, that's not there, but don't focus too much. But it's freedom and transformation. So the cross becomes the mirror of truth. We see ourselves in our capacity to love and in our own brokenness, right? We need an honest acceptance of who we are with our strengths and weaknesses. And when we can accept ourselves, this is liberating. Finally, we can embrace what is difficult within us. We can almost metaphorically say that we can embrace the leper within, right? The ugly. So this is a place of inner freedom. Like that, Lord, that's my wounding. And that's how I am. And in fact, Bishop Greg Homing was saying that our failings, our weaknesses define us. And then this is what's going to stay with all our lives. And the more we embrace, actually, the more free we become. And then he was really talking about this. And that's the place where we can have grace to keep working, because we will never be without temptation. And then slowly we can do that and accept this. Then we can overcome the compulsion to sin, in the sense that once the temptation comes, we embrace it, then we let it go. We don't have to fall into the temptation and sin. So temptation and sin are two different things. Okay. So transformation is imitation. That's why we talk about imitation, right? After contemplation is imitation. We become like Christ. So becoming, the more we allow ourselves to be transformed by the Spirit of love, the more we become ourselves. The more we become ourselves, the more we're like God. And we become truly ourselves. So Thomas Merton talks about true self and false self. So what we're called to do is to become more and more our true self, and to get rid of the false self, the attachments, the power play, I need to look good, all that. I can almost hear John Paul sniggering at this point about me, but it's okay. Each of us is created in a unique way to express the love of God in the world and to show the face of God to the world. So we are all unique. Imagine without you as you, the world would be actually a less colorful place. So embrace yourself and show yourself to the world as God intended you to be, your true self. So the integral relationship between self-identity, you are my beloved son, you are my beloved daughter, the identity, and imitation of Christ through contemplation is the path of transformation, by which love draws forth the image in which we are created, an image that is beautiful to the cross of suffering and love. You can see that keep using the same words already. The key is the Spirit. So the Holy Spirit is key to do all that. And we have to come to terms with our own suffering. So it's very difficult to embrace other people's suffering if we cannot embrace our own suffering. So when Francis could embrace a leper, basically it was his time of conversion. At that time, he was beginning to be able to embrace his own difficulties as well, right? And this requires us to be poor. And that's why poverty is so big for us Franciscans. It's because only one who is poor can gaze long enough to become inwardly free, be joined with Christ. To be poor means no attachment, no chains, nothing that compels us to act in another way except God's way. Right? So poverty is that. I'll just read one more line. The gift of the Spirit is the fruit of poverty, which makes us inwardly free. And when we are poor, then we can fully accept God's love for us. Freedom that arises from poverty is not independence or autonomy, which is what people are shouting, I want freedom. But this freedom is of the Spirit that joins us with Christ and enables us to gaze into the heart of Christ. I don't know whether you'll manage to come to this point about the living example. So Iladilio was saying that she was giving the talk, and then a Protestant, maybe a pastor, came up to her and said that after listening to this session, he could finally accept and embrace his mother who had abandoned him and abused him. And he recognized the presence of the crucified, not only in the mother, but also within himself. So this is a practical application of this whole chapter. That he saw his mother crucified by weakness and fragility, and he saw himself crucified by the demons of his past that prevented him from loving her. So with this contemplative eye, he begins to see deeper into the suffering, the pain of the mother that's causing pain to him. But by loving the mother, he was then able to transcend that and felt the freedom to love her and to love himself. And that's why forgiveness is so key to our Christian spirituality. And this kind of love is really outrageous because we can see the love of God visible in the scandal of the disfigured cross. This figure, Christ on the cross. And the final slide here. That have you not heard, do you not see? And not realizing all the while that Christ is in our midst, which means the eyes of our heart has been closed until the breaking of bread, then everything was open. That the disciples were dejected in suffering because they lost what they thought was the Messiah. But after the breaking of bread, they themselves walked back to Jerusalem and proclaimed that we have seen the Lord. In the breaking of bread, broken. So some using questions that Ilidilio invites us. So we can take this moment to just read the questions. Excuse me. And we take about 5 minutes of silent time, and then we'll break out into groups. And we can spend another 25 minutes until 9:30, and then we'll take some questions until 9:45. Okay. So go for your bio break. We'll come back at 9:10 to break out into groups. Okay, enjoy the musing time.